today on the show, I am so excited to be chatting with Pavel Zoneff. Pavel is a live event and content producer based in LA. Born to Bulgarian German parents, he grew up in Europe before emigrating to the US in pursuit of happiness, love, and his dreams. A pivoting expert, he has worn many professional hats, including overseeing and producing national branding and ad campaigns for major Silicon Valley companies like Uber, Google, Tinder, WeWork, and Microsoft, among others. When he is not busy playing with his dog or hiking with his husband, he dedicates his free time to honing his photographic, musical, and podcasting skills. His podcast is called Affected By and dives deep into how people across different professions are making it work at work during the pandemic. Be sure to check it out on all the major podcasting platforms. Pavel, I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm a really big fan of your pod. So I love what you're doing, and I'm glad to be a guest on here.
Thank you. No, I am just as excited, if not even more. You know, Pavel and I, we met to give the audience a little bit of context. We met on a online podcasting community forum called Matchmaker, which is I don't think I've ever explained it. Actually, it's a forum where there's various different podcasters, podcasting guests that can kind of meet up and kind of exchange information, you know, and do some sort of collaboration, such as Pavel and I are currently doing. Yeah. So if anyone is actually interested in, you know, getting into the podcasting realm or just sharing their own stories and experiences, that's, I think, something that all of us really enjoy doing. You know, you can kind of go onto that platform and kind of reach out and collaborate with so many different creatives. And so today with Pavel, I am so excited because I've been so intrigued at the idea of being multilingual and just learning so many different languages. I've been such a huge fan and wanting to learn so many different languages. And, you know, Pavel growing up in Europe, and I believe you speak 4 or 5 different languages. I just wanted to kind of pick your brain and learn how being multilingual has kind of affected your own life experience at large, but kind of a little bit more specific. I also am kind of curious to see how being multilingual has affected your approach to business endeavors. Yeah. So today I am so excited to kind of learn a little bit more about how your life experiences have really shaped or have been shaped rather as a result of being multilingual. And so I'd love it if you can kind of give us a little bit of background, you know, having grown up in Europe, you know, to a binational family. You know, how did learning multiple languages as a kid influence your views on what you thought was possible for you as you were growing up? And, you know, what was maybe even a limiting factor you thought, you know, growing up in Europe?
It's actually interesting because some of the more limiting aspects came to mind when you first mentioned it. But I think to set it up, so my father was Bulgarian. He died when I was younger. My mother was German from East Germany, and I was born at a time when, you know, the Soviet Union was still alive. So and my parents made the decision when I was born. They had just completed their studies in Germany to actually move to Bulgaria. So for the first couple of years of my life, I grew up there, and then my family didn't really move back to Germany until the wall came down. And so I always think of myself even as tri-national because the Eastern German experience for my mother was vastly different to the Germany that then we returned after the reunification. So, but as far as you know, languages, I didn't even understand that I spoke multiple languages, and really to the extent that it was just dependent or contingent on what family member I was speaking to. I just knew they speak Bulgarian to me. And when I looked at a different family member, they speak German to me. And also for a time being, not everybody in my family speaks both languages. So I usually in mixed company was always the translator. I was 3 years old and already like an interpreter. So I didn't give it a thought. And then actually I went to kindergarten in Germany, and I didn't really have a sense of where I was geographically. And apparently, like, I spoke Bulgarian on my first day there. And so other kids laughed at me. And that was a big moment, which actually kind of made me really tune into, okay, where am I? Who am I addressing? What am I speaking? Like, what language will I be speaking? And that was such an awkward experience that I would constantly ask my parents, what country am I in? Even when we just like went on a half hour car ride, I was like, are we still in Germany? Am I still speaking German? Because it was such an awkward experience to have like an
Hmm.
entire classroom on your first day laugh at you because you speak a different language. Um, and so, yeah, so I think that was when I kind of became aware, and I felt it was a little limiting in the beginning because I didn't. It took me years and years, and actually, like until I was a teenager, that I understood speaking multiple languages is actually a quality.
Hmm.
Especially, when it came time, like in my late teens, to figure out what am I going to do professionally. That hey, this is a skill. This is something that you should put front and center in your resume. And
Hmm.
this is when I first started changing my mind. And I think in terms of career, I I never felt that I had any limits. This might, also be, my privilege as a white guy. So I always thought you could do whatever, but I was actually struggling with that choice. And and then I returned again to my ability and my interest in speaking multiple languages.
Hmm.
And I entered a college program to become a French and English teacher. So even before going into marketing, which is also like a different story, but I actually studied and trained to be a language teacher.
Mm, very interesting. Yeah, that's crazy. That I find that story so funny. Being a kid and going to kindergarten and speaking a language and like, oops, this is not the right language that
Yeah.
everyone speaks in this class, and how that completely transformed. Okay, I gotta really have a spatial awareness of where am
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
what is, I guess, quote unquote acceptable, what is the actual language that's spoken here, and that can kind of really shape you both positively and negatively, and then how that
Yeah.
kind of led you to now, like you were just mentioning, going on to become a teacher of both
Yeah.
French and English. And so I'm curious. So French, like becoming a linguistics teacher, was that always what you thought you envisioned as a kid, or was that kind of just as a result of, oh, this quality of learning multiple languages is a pretty cool skill, like you were mentioning?
So actually, absolutely not. And even going, like really being faced with kind of quote unquote limitless opportunities, to me that was almost a challenge. Like I'm a person, and we'll get into this in a bit, but the more restrictions I have, the more creative I get, the easier it
Mm,
is, for me to kind of move ahead. So when I have a complete blank slate, blank page, I'm always like, okay, that's uninspiring. And so becoming teacher was really just kind of a thing that I felt at that point made the most sense for me. And what was interesting is it was also driven because my mother said, you got to get a college degree. Like, I don't care what it is, but you have to
mm,
have it. It's also kind of a very classist thing to still, that is still very present in Germany, that, and it's probably even more and more that uh, people are looking for a college degree, whether it is in your profession or not, but definitely having a college degree. So that was never a choice, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to go to college, but it was also
mm,
something that now I'm glad that my parents pushed me to do. My mother pushed me to do. But at the end of the day, through studying this, I discovered my interest in education as a subject matter, because especially like teacher training, because it covers so many things that are useful in any career, in any job. And I always tell people, like, if you don't know what to do, uh, train or study to be a teacher, because if you want to learn about time management, if you want to learn about how communicating things to a difficult target audience, if you want to learn how to just uh, like some basic ideas of how communication works, of how people's psychology work, those are all part for the course in these study
mm,
programs. So um, yeah, I was fortunate to have all these insights, and then it was kind of towards the end of these studies that I discovered actually being a teacher is not for me.
mm,
And then when I transitioned into what was then the job that I had, working for a marketing agency, to support myself during my time in college, that then became my full time job, and where I could apply 90% of the skills and knowledge that I had acquired.
Hmm. No, it's so funny when you realize that, even though teaching wasn't kind of the end all profession that was really suited towards you, that it
Yeah.
taught you, like you mentioned, so many of these invaluable skills that you can apply in any other profession that you chose to pursue. And now how it's kind of colored your
Yeah.
outlook and kind of the way you approach marketing. And
Yeah.
so I'm
Sorry, I
curious.
mean, pitching in front of, a big firm and telling them what their new marketing campaign is going to
Mhm.
be is definitely less stressful than standing in front of a room full of seventh graders trying to teach them French. I will say, like, I definitely traded up.
No, I
Mm,
definitely remember, being back in school. Definitely, it's funny when you grow up and you realize, teachers, they have one of the hardest jobs in the world
yes,
trying to, like
absolutely.
teaching, learning to learn and then having to then teach that to,
Yeah.
children growing up. It's a very difficult skill. So, I want to give props out to any and every single teacher out there in the world. It is not an easy job, and it's definitely something that we shouldn't take for granted. And so kind of on the note of you transitioning into, the marketing agency and getting into your career in marketing, you then kind of transitioned
Hmm.
over here across to the States in
Oh, yeah.
marketing. And I'm sure it was very difficult at first, just given how you weren't a native English speaker, kind of transitioning to the States and finding your footing. So I'm kind of curious, how was that experience like? And also, what did you find having at this point, knowing four different languages influenced your career in marketing, just generally having a bit your own business sense?
Yeah, I mean, to circle back to one of the aspects that I discovered also as a young person, like the thing that I didn't have any trepidation about was moving to a different country. And I don't know whether it was, self-confidence or naivete or whatever it was, but I thought, oh, this is just another geographic. I'm sure I can make it work. So in the beginning, I didn't feel that it was going to be an uphill battle. And ironically, or not ironically, I guess, to America's credit, the fact that somebody's not a native speaker is not a career limiting factor, I think,
Hmm.
in many ways. Um, and and so what I had to overcome was more not thinking of myself as being limited in that way. So
Hmm.
because nobody was even pointing it out. And actually, like in terms of having a marketing job, people were referring to me more and more actually for writing, copywriting jobs, and definitely everybody wanted me to edit their things, their work product, and that was purely because obviously like because of my formal training in the language, like I can look at something and say, oh no, the grammar is off here,
Hmm.
or I could look at a word and think, oh, we're repeating this too much, or there is a different word that you can use to express that same idea and make the text more interesting or whatever it was. So
Hmm.
because I had a more abstract outside kind of point of view on the language, people increasingly like referred to me for edits, which then in turn gave me the confidence and to stay in this profession. I think what the bigger hurdle was is that a big part of my job in Germany was that because I was fluent in so many languages, a lot of the American-based companies that I had worked for and that ostensibly were my professional network, they were relying on me to localize their campaigns in the
Hmm.
German-speaking market, like
Hmm.
Switzerland, Austria, and Germany. So I kind of had lost that superpower because they were specifically working with me, reaching out to me because I was there geographically in
Hmm.
Europe.
Hmm.
And so the bigger challenge moving to the US was actually restructuring my professional network, making these new connections, and kind of going back and humbling myself and understanding, oh no, you're starting your career from scratch in many ways.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then again, what also helps in that multilingual mindset is I've learned to be good in sales because I can just strike up a conversation with anybody
Hmm.
about anything, right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
so that was helpful and that slowly got me over the hump. But it was actually interesting because I came here and I thought, ooh, is not being a native speaker not going to be a problem? And it wasn't. And then I was like, okay, so but what is my problem? I had to actually like really identify, why
Mm-hmm.
is my career stalling? And it was because of that crutch that I had in my head, thinking that
Mm,
I would be at a disadvantage, which I wasn't. Because
right.
and I think this goes to what I said initially, like again, to America's credit, the way that culturally, especially or specifically like in the profession that I work, like we as knowledge workers, the idea of being present, saying yes, working hard, and delivering a good product is so much more important, and nobody really cares what your language of origin is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
No, that's so funny, and I'm so glad that you're able to share all that knowledge and that experience because I would have assumed that it would have been a huge barrier, but I think like in the field that you're in with marketing, yeah, it really comes
Mhm.
down to I think like you're mentioning to America's credit, if you get a good product out, it really doesn't matter. And as a result, if you can deliver great product, you can then, explore new and bigger opportunities and your background has no bearing on that. And so
Yeah, yeah, and also, I mean, we've talked about it. Like my path to college was because in Germany, it is almost a prerequisite if you want to have access to a certain career level or pay grade. It's
mhm,
it's still in that sense. I mean, thankfully, college is mostly free, and that's great. Or education in general, also public education is really strong and really good. So I'm thankful for going through the system, but at the same time, there are very classist views of, oh wait, you don't have a bachelor's degree, so what are you doing in this marketing position? Like
mhm,
you don't really have access. And what I discovered here in America, again, through sometimes also just being the loudest voice in the room, and and just really like ringing up everyone that I knew, and just telling them that I'm available for work, and just saying yes to
mhm,
whatever project presented itself. That is something that is valued here over, oh, do you
mhm,
have the right credentials?
mhm,
Like, are you
mhm.
willing to put in the work?
Right, right. Yeah, like you're mentioning, if you're willing to extend yourself, just be having an open mind to learning.
Yeah.
And I think that really stems back to the fact that you are multilingual, Pavel, the fact
Yeah.
that you're able to keep your mind open to learning so many different languages. You
Yeah.
know, you're keeping your mind open to these opportunities, and that in turn feeds your own experience of I want to experience different opportunities in my life and different professional experiences. And that's so valuable here in the States. And so I'm so glad that you were able to kind of experience all of these different fruits that America has to offer from a
Absolutely. Yeah.
professional aspect. And so,
And quite frankly, I think it's also, I mean, I think it's a good reminder also, because obviously lately, as far as America is concerned, we've gotten a little more hopeful.
mhm,
But we've went
mhm,
through a period of a lot of America bashing and a lot of things that are
mhm,
fundamentally wrong. And I'm not saying that, they're not still wrong, but it is up to us to change these things and to participate in
yep,
public life. And I just remember, I mean, I came here, I don't have any voting rights. I mean, I have a green card, but I can't vote. But what I discovered in this process is also I can help shape civic life
mhm,
through other means. I can, participate in a phone bank. I can, be outspoken against things. There are other levels of being involved in civically, and to
right,
practice civic engagement. And I think every time, like, I think I feel a little Pollyanna, quote unquote, about America. This comes from a place of really liking and enjoying to live here, and focusing on the positive,
mhm.
and working from a place of positivity to maybe change the things that we need change on a more systemic level.
No, yeah, definitely, definitely. And so this really goes back to everything, having that open mind, having
Yeah.
that willingness to seek out the opportunities. Don't have that limiting idea in your mind when it comes to like civic duty. Oh, I can only
Uh,
do it through a vote. I can do it through other means,
uh,
other forms of expression. And I think that stems from, having that openness from the get-go of learning all these different languages, understanding that there are so many different ways you can approach things. And so as a
mhm,
result, that feeds so many of your other
mhm,
experiences
yeah.
professionally, um, through civic duty, through your social experiences, everything. And so I'm kind of curious, kind of stepping back from
Mhm.
a professional business mindset and looking more broadly at life.
Yeah.
What are some other benefits you found just through your own personal experiences that being multilingual has really helped out with, that you feel as if made your life more enriched than it would have otherwise been potentially had you not
Uh,
been multilingual?
yeah, I mean, the difficult task I think is always I wouldn't know how it would be otherwise, and
Mm-hmm.
what I can definitely enjoy is I even though I'm not like a super avid reader, but if there is a book in Italian or if there's a book in French, I just read it in its original language. And
Mm-hmm.
even lately, I have started reading German books in their English translation, and I can find
Mm,
kind of the beauty in how translators are interpreting concepts that I guess culturally don't necessarily make sense,
right.
or are trying to approximate kind of the feeling that the written word in the original is just translating it literally on a more emotional level through language. So I can certainly appreciate that. But really practical in life, what I've taken away the most is the importance of not taking things personally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really, because people express themselves through language, and unfortunately language is always a very limiting way of expressing yourself, especially if you might not be fluent in a specific language. So sometimes when you know I read an email or I talk to somebody on the phone, I try to again keep this open mind. I'm like, oh, this sounds weird to me, or I feel weirdly attacked, but this might not be the intention. It's just based on however somebody speaks.
Right.
So what I've learned as a process, I ask more questions to really understand. Hey, so I understood it this and that way. Like, did you really mean for it to come to say that or
Mm-hmm.
to come off that? Like, I try to be more relaxed when communicating with people. I've understood that in many contexts, personally or professionally, you just need to repeat yourself or you need to communicate on multiple different levels. Like we can have a meeting, but then I need to follow up with an email, also
Mm-hmm.
like outlining and then, following up or asking questions so people truly understand it. Like I think communicating on multiple levels is so important. And also understanding now specifically with COVID, how important actually video messages are,
Mm-hmm.
or Zoom calls, because in the early days, I think everybody was a little, or I remember in my colleagues, they were a little hesitant to go on video, or whatever, or because they didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
show their house or whatever it was, whatever insecurity it was. But what I've discovered in those early days, regardless of how many languages you speak, your nonverbal communication is just so much stronger than
Right.
anything that you can say in any word in any language. So
Mm-hmm.
turn your video on and be present, because really a smile or a raised eyebrow or all these things can go a long way, or the ability to just, when somebody's having a conversation, to really just see what is your reaction. Oh, do I need to elaborate on this? Am I confusing you? Are you keeping up? So
Mm-hmm.
I think, ironically, the more languages you learn, you start to understand that the spoken word or even the written word has more potential for confusion than anything else. And the
Mm-hmm.
more you know about language, you understand that it is more the nonverbal interactions that really build relationships.
Right. That's such an interesting idea. I actually do notice that myself as well, where, yeah, that's something I've actually never actually noticed from individuals when I think of how receptive are they to understanding,
Mm,
is what I'm communicating actually getting across to the other person across the table, or now the COVID through, like, the Zoom call, where
yeah.
when you have all those languages you realize it's probably not happening.
Yeah.
I see that something's off here. I need to
Yeah.
figure out what's going on. There's some nonverbal cues that are probably giving
Yeah.
me an
Yeah.
indication that I'm not getting my message across as clearly, so I need to reframe it or be open to asking,
Absolutely.
am I being clear? And if not, how can, where's the confusion, and maybe potentially where's the room for improvement on my end to communicate better, so that way we're all on the same page. It's not just me getting a message across and hoping, oh, you have to get it all right. You have to have it completely, clear in your mind. It's a back and forth. It's a team. you're working with that individual. And so you have to find where is it potentially that you're falling short.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and you said like making the act of making sure that somebody understands you, that often works through asking questions, or being perceptive. But asking a question means you're open to receiving feedback. And I think this is the most important thing, like really understanding, okay, I need to listen, I need to observe. Like your again, it's fine if you speak 4 or 5 languages, but your ability to listen, to be quiet, to be perceptive is a much stronger skill. So even if you just speak one language, the moments in which you're listening more, you're probably where you're not speaking, where you're listening, are probably the ones that you're communicating most effectively.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
I wish more of us could understand that concept, but I think, with
Yeah.
COVID, I think hopefully people are, through these Zoom calls, it's a different form of communication, versus doing it in person in a room together. So I hope that people are, like you were mentioning, kind of internalizing that idea that, okay, let's our understanding, 90% of communication is done non-verbally through your gestures. So and now through Zoom calls, you can understand, why was what I used to do in person with you not working? So, this has been a great time to, really start to dial in on your listening skills and understand how do you present yourself? How do you receive others? And so it's a completely different way of perceiving individuals through communication. And so I could go on for hours on this topic. It's such an expansive topic. I feel like we're going in so many different directions, but I want to be respectful of your time, Pavel. And so what I like to do at the end of each and every single one of my episodes with my guests is this final segment called the 3 keys to relationship. And so this is a segment where I ask guests 3 questions to kind of gauge their insights towards their philosophy towards relationship management. And so these questions pertain to any and all relationships. So social with friends, family, romantic partners, business colleagues, what have you. And these aren't quick fire questions at all either. So I'd love to hear you elaborate on these. And so the first question I have is, what's your number 1 relationship red flag?
Yeah. So relationships that are unequal, that are uneven, when there is a level of, and that goes for all relationships, like professionally or personally. Like obviously, like I understand that there is a certain dynamic, client and service provider, and often I find myself in the service provider role. Like that means there is some sort of hierarchy, but that does not mean that the relationship has to be unequal, because I do think of any relationship as a partnership, because people want something from each other, respectively, can give something to each other. And so the way that it translates to romantic relationships, and what the number 1 red flag is, if you're constantly seeking your partner's validation, or you notice about your partner that they're constantly seeking validation, then you immediately know something's off, because then there's an imbalance. Then you're either not happy with yourself, or your partner's not happy with themselves. And if the relationship is the thing that fixes them, then just walk away, because you can't. Like you're not there to validate your partner. A partnership is, ideally on eye level, you support each other. Again, that does not mean that, as far as it comes to certain things, like if one of you is the better cook and the other one, has more of an inclination to, I don't know, like do the laundry, then that does not mean that they're unequal. It's just you are aware that you both have a role in your relationship, and that you're contributing to the well-being of that relationship through whatever thing comes more naturally to you.
Right. No, I love that example you brought up at first with, client and service provider, in terms of understanding. Like I work in that same sort of environment, and there is this kind of subtle, unspoken kind of hierarchy that you think of kind of in terms of how you approach that type of relationship, where it is, like you mentioned, it's a partnership. It's you're trying to, as a service provider, provide the utmost product, the services that you are to the client. And similarly, the client wants to, establish that relationship with you to form that partnership for the long haul. At the end of the day, when it comes to, I guess this is more on the business sense, it's a people business. That's all it is. It doesn't, it's not really about the product. It's about establishing those relationships, understanding how do you communicate
Yeah.
with one
Yeah.
another. And then the
Yeah.
product, as a result, you know, comes at a high quality as a result of having that great communication and partnership. And same when it goes for romantic partnerships. I
Yeah.
find that, yeah, when you have that self-awareness, yeah, I myself not the greatest cook, so I know kind of where my strengths lie, where my
Yeah.
weaknesses lie, and then with a partner you can kind of, come together and you know serve a role that highlights your strengths, but at the same time you grow together by bringing those strengths together and being able to, I hate kind of saying like cover for your weaknesses, but more so, but it's really bringing the entire picture together and growing together as partnership at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think just understanding that your goal is to be together, to live together. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm married, and what that meant is my then boyfriend and myself, we looked at each other and we wanted to plan our life together. We had certain
Mm-hmm.
goals, life goals that we wanted to accomplish together, and that meant that we also had to look at, okay, if you're designing a life together, both people have to actively contribute. They might contribute in different ways,
Mm-hmm.
but your partnership can only work if what your partner contributes is also the thing that works for you and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I do think that a lot of people in other types of relationship are trying to cover for something that they would wish their partner would bring in. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the moments, again, when I'm saying like, just run, because that's a recipe for disaster. If there's something that you're not
Mm-hmm.
getting from your partner that is important to you, first of all, it's okay for you to think that this is important to you. But then also recognizing if you're not getting that from your partner, then it's time to move on. I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn that lesson. Like I had like really in times long dysfunctional relationships for that matter. And it wasn't really until I also discovered for myself that, oh, this is okay for me to want, and I either find somebody who can give me that or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the moment. It sounds so cliche, but that was the moment that I met my now husband. So it was, once I was clear on what those red flags are, what I need, that was
Mm-hmm.
fine.
No, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you were able to realize that. And it's funny because everyone thinks, don't be selfish. It's a relationship.
Oh yeah.
But in reality, that is the one area I guess you do have to be selfish in. Like you have to understand, be aware what is it that you want out of your life, and you have to ensure that you can find a partner who can give that to you, but also at the same time bring that up. Have that
Yeah.
conversation. Maybe they just don't realize that that's something that you do desire, and
I
so.
would also contend that we as people living, in Western cultures and Western societies have the potential to be not selfish. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of baked into really into our cultural values. I mean, especially here in America, it's always like, you know, about performance, about striving for something
Mm-hmm.
better, pursuit of success, happiness, whatever it is. Like, so it's hard to then go back and say, you know what, if this is the cultural climate that we're surrounded by, to then say, oh, but be less selfish. Like you got to
Mm-hmm.
be the best at everything. You got to succeed all the time. Like,
Right.
but be less selfish. I mean, that does not work.
Exactly. Exactly. So the second question I have is a kind of a converse to that is, what is your most underrated relationship quality?
Routines and reliability.
Mm.
I think they always get a bad rap, like, oh, we're in a rut. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, whatever it is. Every Saturday we're I don't know, we're doing this, or we're doing our grocery shopping or whatever. Like it sounds weird. We don't do it. My husband and I don't do it, but we do have a daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
Since he and I, we both work a lot and also have the tendency to sometimes, because of our jobs, work after hours. What we do is we find a time every single day to just really get together and
Mm-hmm.
just be there with each other, to usually talk about our days, but whether it is like cocktail hour or walking the dog together, going on hikes, but there is a routine, and I treasure that and I value that. And that is important. And I think a lot of people might think that this is boring, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think this is probably the strongest quality that a relationship has, when there's this unspoken habit that you both engage in on a regular basis. I think that to me is the marker of a strong relationship. And I do think that probably also goes, for friendships and for, I mean, I definitely noticed that with friendships, especially um COVID, not so much, but I think a lot of people have noticed that during COVID, like
Mm-hmm.
checking in with everybody on a regular basis, especially when you don't get to see them. But I had noticed that moving, across the globe, that I was no longer, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to just, oh, let's go for drinks, which
Mm-hmm.
you do, spontaneously. So I lost touch with a lot of friends in the beginning, and I needed to remind myself the only way to stay in touch is if you make an effort, if you make it a routine. And then,
Mm-hmm.
every other week I call, my friend Alice, and every, week I call, my friend John, whatever it is. I do
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
routines are important.
No, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree. It's funny because I think it's the way in which we grow up kind of seeing media portray how, the best relationships are. It's very, like you were mentioning, those spontaneous
Oh
outings
yeah.
that you have when that's kind of not really where the relationship lives. Like I've had this
Yeah.
conversation with a friend where 90% of the relationship lives outside of that spontaneity. And so when you have that routine, that structure built in, that's where the truly precious moments come in to those relationships, the really treasure chest moments like you were mentioning.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if you value this, then I think you're probably also more likely to relax, because I don't think that there's anything more stressful to think, oh, we need to have the next adventure and we need
Mm-hmm.
to do this. Because here's the thing: what are you going to do when there's a pandemic and you can't have the next adventure? You can't go on that trip to Italy. You can't do whatever. Go to
Mm-hmm.
that restaurant. Like, then really all you have is you know, walking to and from the couch.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
yeah, having that routine, having that
yeah,
structure, like you were mentioning, kind of going out for a walk with the dog,
yeah, yeah.
that is, I wholeheartedly
A
agree. That
dog is also a great way to get a routine too, like, because they
exactly.
need to go out, they need to eat,
Yeah, exactly. So the third and final question I have is, what's your own mantra, or if you were to create one, if you don't have one, what's your own mantra or slogan for relationship management? And so, to give some context, this podcast centers itself around the idea that we don't make relationships, but we make relationships better. So I'm
Okay.
curious, what would your own mantra or slogan kind of look like? And this can apply, I guess, to life at
Yeah.
large as well.
Well, in the vein of making relationships better, absolutely the number one thing: listen more than you talk. I mean, I've said it before in a professional context. I do think it definitely applies. I think it also applies with your friends to a certain extent. I do think it applies to your partner, and that doesn't mean that there aren't phases where you're just talking and venting, or there's something. But if you're realizing that you're usually the one who starts to talk about an issue that is coming up in the relationship, or you're the one who always uh, pushes a certain topic, then and you're not getting back from your partner, or you're not getting the feedback, or your partner doesn't engage in that conversation. So when you find yourself in a position where you're talking more than you're listening, when it's not a true conversation, then you know that there's an imbalance that might need
Mm-hmm.
your attention. And the same way also with the with the client relationship. You're a subject matter expert in something. This is why a client hired you, and you can speak to that, and they can have questions, and vice versa. You need to take in what they're saying, but at the same time you also need to present these things. So the more that you can think of these things as in balance, I think the better the relationships will work.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was actually having this conversation yesterday. And it's the same idea. Yeah, listen more than you speak. You have two ears and
Mm.
one mouth. Do
Yeah,
those things in proportion. As cliche as it sounds,
yeah,
that's how you'll understand where those imbalances may lie in your relationship. If you find, like you were mentioning, you're speaking too much, maybe there's something that the partner you're working with in a business, in a romantic, in a friendship setting, maybe there's something that they're having a tough time bringing up to you, and you're not allowing that space for that individual to bring that, issue up to the forefront that could potentially help, resolve any underlying issues that you may not see in a relationship. And so I think that's such a great point for individuals. I think COVID has definitely helped that
Yeah.
on that front in terms of having individuals having these honest, open conversations and having that space for people to speak, whereas otherwise we might have not had those.
Yeah, and I mean there are tools to to remind yourself like every single day. Asking questions is also a good way to listen because let's say you said something to me and maybe I misunderstand it or I have some sort of an emotional reaction to it rather than reacting. Just again ask the question. So is that what you mean? And that gives the other person another opportunity to speak, to rephrase, to comment on that and you a chance to take in what the other person has said that you had an initial reaction to. So yeah, just active listening tools all across the board. Like when you say X, I'm hearing this. But like, that's also
Hmm.
listening. Like listening, it doesn't just mean being silent. It actually just means helping move the conversation into a direction that helps you take in the message that
Hmm.
your the person opposite you is trying to communicate.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And so I think, the really big highlight here as part of this final segment is, yeah, finding that balance in the
Yeah,
relationship,
yeah,
finding balance in
yeah.
listening and, that partnership that you have with, in a business setting, with your romantic partner, with your friends, understanding that, you kind of go through the ebbs and flows of these relationships, but always trying to center yourself back and understanding where is the balance? Am I potentially not reaching out enough? Am I speaking too much and putting, you know, more effort in than the other individual from a communication aspect? And so I need to allow that individual space to speak their mind and ask them those questions, like you were mentioning. Hey, am I not getting through to you correctly? Or,
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that I'm not kind of leaving you in the dust, I guess,
yeah,
for
yeah.
the lack of a better word or
No,
phrase.
absolutely. Yeah.
But I think it's such a vitally important thing to understand and reassess that balance that you have, because you can think that you're in balance all the time, but you have to it's a constant reassessment, like you were mentioning. So
And like you said, I mean, you don't make relationships,
mhm,
and it is not the nature of a relationship to be balanced all the time. At
mhm.
least I don't think it is. It will be. I couldn't imagine how this will work, but yeah,
No, I agree. I agree.
yeah,
Otherwise, you would see everyone it's kumbaya, but in reality,
yeah,
that you don't see it like that, and that's why relationships are so difficult. But it's finding that simplicity in the balance. When you find that, okay, focus on the balance. What are the elements I need for balance in a relationship? And so I love all of the different elements that you specifically pointed out, Pavel, and also, with your entire life journey, being
yeah,
multilingual, moving across the world, from Europe to now the States, and understanding, spatially, where am I? Like,
yeah.
what language am I speaking? And then trying to, and then putting the effort in. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things, when it comes to balance. If you put the effort in, more likely than not, you'll be working your way towards that balance in one shape, form, or another. And so this has been such a great conversation, Pavel. I really enjoyed chatting with you about the entire multilingual perspective on
Yeah.
business, on life at large. And, I wanted to leave some time here at the end for you to kind of, if individuals are interested in working with you, or just checking out your podcast and any other lasting messages you'd like to leave, I'd love to leave this time here at the end for yourself.
Oh, I mean, I'm always happy for people to check out my podcasts because it is obviously very much inspired by my take on life in general. It's a business podcast that kind of focuses on the resiliency that people have developed during COVID.
Hmm.
So it's called Affected By. You can find it on most major platforms. And what we do is every single week we have a panel of guests from one specific industry that really walk us through how this pandemic became real for them and how they have pivoted and adjusted. There are also some stories in there where people, were faced with really existential problems and challenges that they had to overcome. So it is really a good overview of what has been happening in the business world over the last year from through the lens of personal stories of people. So go check that out. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Affected by Pod. And you can find me personally on Instagram if you want to connect with me at Gazebook, GAZEBOOK.
Awesome. Yeah. And I will be linking all of that information down in the show notes or in the description if you're watching the video version of this on YouTube. Pavel, this has been such a great conversation. I can't wait to see what you continue to go on doing. And, you know, I wish I spoke some of the language that you speak rather. But, you know, I definitely am going to add some of those languages to my checklist, you know, with like German and Bulgarian and everything. But, you know, this has been such a great conversation nonetheless.
It really has been. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And it was funny because I was talking to you about things that I hadn't reflected on in a while. So it was great to revisit some of those moments.
Hey everyone, my name is Shadman Rahman, and thanks for tuning in to my YouTube channel today. I hope you found this episode of the Between Us podcast enjoyable, and that you're walking away feeling entertained, inspired, and/or motivated. If you particularly enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and smash the like button down below and leave your thoughts in the comments section. And if you'd like to go ahead and keep up with the podcast, go ahead and follow our social media. And please go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so that way you can find out about new episodes as soon as they're released. Until next time, everyone, take care, and we'll see you all in the next episode.